Hi, this is Phil. The presentation you are about to watch was a presentation that I gave at Phenomecon in Vernal, Utah. The presentation was not recorded like I thought it was going to be, so at the last minute my wife used my cell phone and did a Facebook Live. Now that allowed us to capture the presentation, but the quality is not very good. So what I've done is I've edited that presentation, and I've inserted the actual video and some of the pictures, the slides from my PowerPoint presentation, so that you can get a better appreciation of what I actually spoke about.
Introduction. This last spring there was a UFO symposium that I felt my friend said he was going to it, so at the last minute I decided to get a ticket for Saturday and just pop into it. I wasn't paying this speaker Phil's any attention because I didn't know who he was. And then we got back from lunch and my friend had that book. And I'm like, you bought that guy's book? He goes, you're going to want to check this out, right? And so I made sure before the end of the day, because it was the only day I got, that I got a copy of it. I think he even asked Phil for him to sign it. It's some scratch, you know. Just kidding. I read the book in about 3 days. It was like air and water to me. So just for those of you who are wondering whether it's worth it or not, it's worth it. So, as an introduction, Philip Wright is the best-selling author of several books. I didn't know that, including the Not Without Mercy series, The Black Death and the Passage Home, the story of a family that survives the Black Plague of 1348, a nonfiction book titled Man Against Messiah, the Sanhedrin Plot Against Jesus, and his most recent book, Return from Rysa or Rysa?
Rysa.
Rysa. Rysa.
Rysa is somewhere in France.
Right? Okay. I'm sure we'd all like to go there too. Return from Rysa, a parable based on true events that tells the story of a 4-year-old boy named Connor who throughout his life was abducted by aliens and blessed by angels. Return from Rysa is a 5-book series, so we have a lot to look forward to. Book 1, Angels and Aliens, was co-authored by Phil's dear friend, Richard Nelson. Phill has always been interested in alien abduction and phenomena. As a young boy in Northern California, Phill and his older brother experienced their first of many alien encounters and paranormal experiences that lasted throughout their lives. Being a Christian and believer in aliens, visiting the earth for thousands of years, Phill has always wanted to find a way to unite these sometimes conflicting beliefs. Using his own life experience and the experiences of others, Return from Rysa is a book that bridges God with aliens. It gives great detail about several alien groups, some of which have been visiting the earth for millennia. It reveals who the aliens known as the Grey and the Nordic really are, their origins and their purpose on earth. It also introduces other alien races and evil spirit entities. At age 4, Connor discovered we are not alone in the universe, but surrounded by angels and aliens. Please welcome Phill Wright. Woo!
Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to do a couple of things. This is kind of an odd-shaped room. And I don't want to do the Sunday thing. Everybody move in and move up. Stay where you are. But, you know, it's just odd that I'm going to have to do the typewriter thing. Some of you don't even know how to typewriter is. Anyway, so I apologize. But let's go ahead and start. easier to kind of do that type of introduction than you just yap at you. Do you ever look into the night sky and wonder who's looking back at you? I've done that my whole life. Have you ever gone to some place far away from the hustle and bustle of the world where there's not a lot of noise and just listened? I do that quite often myself. And it's amazing to me what you can see and what you can hear when you get away from all of life's distractions. That's how I recharge. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've been here for a couple days now, and this has been a real recharge for me. So I'm so grateful to be here. I'm grateful for the organization that put this event together, and I'm extremely grateful for all of you that came so far to be here. So I want to give all of these people you a hand. Thank you so much. So I've already been introduced, so I'm not going to go that far into my own personal introduction, but I will say a couple of things. This December, I will have been married to my lovely wife, Sean, for 40 years. And I am so blessed because of that. We've been blessed with 7 children and 14 grandchildren. So I believe I hold the record of anyone who's presented at this conference. I will challenge those, but I believe I hold the record. Now, I was born in Northern California. I was raised most of my life in Georgia. That's why I have this very heavy Southern accent. But I want you to know, because I was raised there, I can turn it on or turn it off if I need it. It's just embedded in my brain, okay? But I'm not going to do that, because the last 25 years, we raised our family here in Utah, in Bountiful. As far as my background, I currently do marketing consulting. As Wayne mentioned, I've written several books. I've also worked in television and radio as a producer, a director, a writer, and sometimes an on-camera talent. When I wrote my first book in 2012, Not Without Mercy, The Black Death, people were looking at me and thinking, who writes their first book on the Black Death? What is wrong with you? And I questioned what was wrong with me too, until I realized, as I was writing the story, I wrote it as a historical fiction, but I discovered so much truth in the people that I was writing about, that I became very connected to those people. And I've written 2 books out of that 3-book series, and I ignore people who ask me when is book 3 coming out, because book 2 came out in 2018. I've written another book since. So hopefully our time today will be educational, maybe a little eyebrow raising. I might even challenge some of your beliefs. But I am here today because I am a believer, not just because of what other people say or have written or experienced, but because of my own experiences. And I will share a couple of those as I go through this presentation. Okay. Yeah. Yes, that's me and my buddy. It was really hard to get him to pose that long, especially with balance on that little ship. So far, my life experience has afforded me the opportunity to speak to large groups all over the country. And being here is kind of the icing on the cake, because this is the first time I've spoken to this type of group of people who truly want to know more. We want the answers. We're tired of our governments around the world pretending the answers are not there. We're here because they know the answers. And if you watch that last presentation, there's only one way we're going to get the answers. It's to do the work ourselves. And to support those types of organizations, like the organization that spoke about an hour ago, to support those types of organizations who don't have the governments in front of them, who are truly being sincere and thoughtful in their investigations. And I promise you, the day will come when every person who lives on this earth will know the truth. They'll know the truth about those who visit us from other worlds. And most of them, not you, but most of them are going to have their minds blown. This is the religion part of my presentation. Bear with me, okay? In the beginning, God said, we will go down, for there is space there, and we will take of these materials, and we will make an earth whereon these may dwell. Personally, I reject the ex nihilo theory that God created something out of nothing, or that our universe was created out of nothing. In the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the first definition for the word create means to bring into existence. That definition rings true with me. The second definition is to invest with a new form. Put those two together. God's creating the world. He's bringing something into existence. He's gathering material that's already been there. He's putting it into a new form. I can accept that definition. That sounds exactly like what an artist does. An artist takes a blank canvas, and they take some paint, and they put it together, and now they've created something new. Without the paint, the canvas remains blank. Now, in the scriptures, in the Bible, we hear the word create. If you look at the actual Hebrew word for create, that word is bara, which means God to shape or fashion. Very different than bringing something out of nothing. God creates using elements that are available to God. I do believe in the supreme creator of the universe, and that he creates by organizing the existing elements. And if I'm correct, those elements he used to create the earth, they could have been organized billions of years ago. So I don't have a problem with people who believe our planet could be 2 billion years old. I don't have a problem with that. I still believe in the creation. I still believe in Adam and Eve. I can accept something like that. So what that does to me, that allows me to bring in the Christian view of creation, and also bring in the ancient alien view that our planet has been here for a couple billion years. And most scientists believe the same thing. I can accept that based on my understanding of what could have happened in order to make that. I hope that makes some sense. All right. For many years, we've had the Hubble telescope, which has been amazing how much information it's given our scientists and our cosmologists, and how many theories have been proven or disproven. And last Christmas, we got the James Webb telescope. Now, Hubble was incredible, but what James Webb has done has really caused a lot of heads to roll in the scientific community. The scientific community believes, most of them, in the Big Bang Theory. Something out of nothing. Aristotle said the notion that there could be nothing that preceded something offends reason itself. I most definitely agree with Aristotle. Now, the Big Bang Theory is in jeopardy because the James Webb telescope is finding galaxies that are much, much older than the hypothesis of when the Big Bang took place. They're also finding galaxies that are small and smooth. And the Big Bang Theory believes that eventually smaller galaxies come together and they make a bigger galaxy. But now, with some of the data coming in from James Webb, they're now having to question what they've always believed.
The new images of the cosmos captured by the James Webb Space Telescope are breathtaking. However, most expert astronomers and cosmologists find them exceedingly shocking, and not at all what the theory predicted. The authors repeatedly remark in the rush of technical astronomical publications, released online since July 12th, that the images show a shockingly large number of galaxies that are surprisingly smooth, surprisingly faint, and surprisingly ancient. There are many surprises, some of which are not always pleasant. The title of one paper begins with a direct exclamation: panic. It is not difficult to understand why these too few, too smooth, too ancient, and too many galaxies are incompatible with the Big Bang Theory. But before we go any further, it's important to note that these discoveries have not yet been peer-reviewed. Big Bang theorists have known for years that the Hubble Space Telescope images indicate an existence of these small, ultra-dense Mighty Mouse galaxies. Unfortunately, James Webb has made things worse. The same theories suggest that small galaxies evolve into modern galaxies by colliding and merging to become more spread out. James Webb saw disproportionately smooth disks and tidy spiral shapes, similar to what we find in today's galaxies. According to the findings in the Panic article, smooth spiral galaxies were around 10 times as abundant as the theory expected, and this would challenge our ideas about mergers being a very common process. In a nutshell, this evidence completely demolishes the merger theory. With few or no mergers, small galaxies cannot expand to be 100 times larger. As a result, they were never small, and hence the optical illusion promised by the expanding universe concept does not occur. However, no illusion implies no expansion. The illusion is an essential consequence of expansion. As a result, Big Bang proponents are in a state of fear. Small and smooth galaxies imply no expansion, and as a result, no Big Bang.
So, my question is, would no Big Bang cause the cosmologists to consider the creation theory? Now, I realize that this is all new information and it's still being processed and analyzed by the researchers and scientists. So, therefore, there is no scientific consensus that the Big Bang did not happen. However, it'll be very, very interesting to see how they spin this one. So, can a Christian believe in God and also aliens from other worlds? At the beginning of my presentation, I stated there is a supreme creator, and that he made worlds without number, and that he placed his children on many of those worlds. I'm finally getting into the alien part of my presentation. Isn't it amazing that with the advent of the Hubble telescope, that cosmologists are now discovering trillions upon trillions of galaxies? And that's when they're looking in a little tiny pinhole out into space. They're not looking like this and discovering trillions. They're discovering trillions and trillions of galaxies when they're looking through a tiny little pinhole of one section of the galaxy. And they're also discovering that there are billions and billions of Earth-like planets. I love the quote from Carl Sagan, where he said, "The universe is a pretty big place. If it's just us, it seems like an awful waste of space." So let's consider that some of our alien cousins are and have been coming to Earth for a very, very long time.
October 11th, 1492, 10 p.m. A calm, clear night. Christopher Columbus and his crew move slowly across one of the deepest ravines of the Atlantic and through the Bermuda Triangle. Below them is almost 4 miles of water. Suddenly, unearthly lights are seen flashing across the bottom of the ocean.
This person's name was Gutierrez, and Gutierrez was on the Santa Maria with Christopher Columbus and noticed an object rising out of the water, a disc-shaped object.
A great flash of light with a level of brilliance unlike anything known at the time suddenly erupts from the sea to the sky, startling Columbus and his crew of 120 aboard the 3-ship Spanish fleet. In less than 5 hours, they would discover the New World.
Christopher Columbus maintained a log in the ship. It describes what could be interpreted as a UFO event. They saw, in the description given in the logbook, the flickering of a wax candle going up and down in the night. It couldn't have been a campfire on ground because it was beyond the horizon.
The October 11th, 1492 sighting was not an isolated occurrence. Over the 2-month journey, Columbus's log exhibits a consistent pattern of cryptically reported peculiar incidents, including unexplained sightings and unusual events in outer space. Entries on both September 17th and September 20th indicate that stars or other unidentified lights in the sky are seen to move.
The cause was that the star moved from its place, but the needles remained stationary.
Is it possible that these strange events, recorded during the most fabled nautical journey in history, were the result of otherworldly vessels tracking Columbus's fleet.
How many have heard this story before? Isn't it amazing? For 2 months, he recorded in his journal, I'm going to use the word UAPs because I guess that's what we should use now. But he recorded this in his journal. He saw them coming out of the water. Not just coming out of the water, but he also saw them in the sky. This was 1492. Now, when I was a kid, I learned 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. I didn't learn anything about that. Why did they leave the best part out? I don't know. There have been UFO accounts, or as they refer today, UAPs, and unidentified underwater craft known for centuries. Not just the last decade or 50 years, but for centuries we've known about this. And we could spend hours and hours talking about the hundreds and hundreds of documented UFO sightings, but I want to focus on just a few of the most spectacular, where there were hundreds or even thousands of eyewitnesses. It's one thing for 1 or 2 people to claim that they saw something, but it's an entirely different story when you have hundreds or even thousands of witnesses. It's much, much harder for the government or the naysayers to dismiss such a sighting. This is probably why most people who have some type of an encounter never tell a person. I have met many, many people in my life. I've met many people at this conference who've never told anybody about an experience they may have had. Let me change that. About an experience they had. Because they're afraid to. They don't want to be labeled a kook or a freak. 5 years before the famous Roswell flying saucer crash, on February 25th, 1942, just 3 months after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, a very strange event occurred over the city of Los Angeles. From approximately 3 a.m. until 4:14 a.m., the city was blasted with loud air raid sirens, streams of aerial searchlights. This is an actual picture, by the way. And ominous anti-aircraft guns, all focused on a spot in the sky above the city as the military fired more than 1,400 rounds of artillery. During this battle, the entire city was blacked out until 7:21 a.m. This is not Salt Lake City. This is not Denver, Colorado. This is one of the largest American cities, Los Angeles. Although radar had detected something headed for California, the coastline, miraculously, no enemy planes or UFOs were hit by American weapons, and no debris other than spent shells were ever found. At first, War Secretary Henry L. Stimson claimed that 15 aircraft were involved in the battle. Then, officials said it was simply a false alarm. How do you have a false alarm of that magnitude where you cut the power of the entire city? Then the Army claimed the object was, you guessed it, anyone want to guess what the object was? A weather balloon! Those weather balloons are so amazing. For thousands of eyewitnesses, this military explanation sparked suspicions of a cover-up that still continues to this very day. Now again, this happened 5 years before the big Roswell event. Here's another one, the Phoenix Lights. This was one of the most remarkable UFO sightings in the world, with thousands of witnesses in one of America's largest cities, Phoenix. It occurred on March 13, 1997, with witnesses from as far north as Nevada state line to as far south as Tucson. Thousands of people phoned in sightings to emergency services that night, describing something absolutely massive and shaped like a boomerang, with 5 round lights along the leading edge or underside of the craft. And this is an actual photograph of one someone took. Whatever it was reportedly made no sound either. The lights were stationary over the Phoenix metro area, some say for as long as 2 hours. review in 1997. Don't you wish you were in Phoenix in 1997 looking up? You had 2 hours to watch this. The U.S. military knows the truth about UFOs. For decades, they have covered up the facts and hidden the truth of the most elusive, agile, and fastest UFO ever known to man. And these aircraft are impervious to weapons of any kind. And now I'm going to show you a declassified, actual military picture of the military UFO I'm referring to. You guessed it. The U.S. military weather balloon. It's faster than our fastest military jets. It can appear and disappear in a flash. It can even dive into the ocean without making a splash. As dumb as that sounds, isn't it amazing that this has been the military's most common answer for the hundreds and hundreds of UFO sightings in the United States since the attack on Los Angeles in 1942? So I thought about this and I thought, if this is true, that the military has this incredible weather balloon, this incredible weapon, we have been built out of billions and billions of dollars for decades given to the military to create faster and more powerful jets. When all the military really needed to do was to attach a basket to the bottom of that balloon, put Dorothy and the wizard from Kansas inside armed with AK-47s. Just think of the damage they could do. Sometimes I just scratch my head at the stupidity that our government expects us to believe. And the sad part is, a lot of people believe it. And they say there's nothing to see here. Keep moving. Okay. In 2018, the Discovery Channel aired a program about a massive UFO found underwater. This is amazing and surprising to me that, as far as I know, it never made it to the front page.
They were actually looking for a cargo of champagne, of all things, when they encountered something which they picked up on their sonar. And when they looked at this thing, they realized there was something down there.
Their sonar displayed a remarkable image. The mysterious object, now known as the Baltic Sea anomaly, is unlike anything the treasure hunters have ever seen. After diving down to get a better look, the explorers find the object to be shaped like a perfectly round saucer, 60 meters in diameter, with a rock-like exterior.
One explanation was that this was the gun turret or the remains of a sunken battleship or submarine or something to that effect. But there's no record of anything going down in the area that this can be connected to. So what is it? We ultimately just have no idea.
Well, this unusual object on the bottom of the Baltic Sea, if you look at it as a flying machine, it looks like something that would be in a science fiction movie that's meticulously put together to do something, to perform something. How big it is, I can't tell from this, but it's not something that was made by currents on the bottom of the ocean. Somebody made that.
The object, whatever it is, looks like the Millennium Falcon from the Star Wars movies. It's got geometric patterns to it, and it does look like a kind of a craft. There are people who believe it's an alien base or even a petrified alien ship if somehow an alien craft is able to turn to stone. Whatever this is, it's not something, I don't think, that formed organically at the bottom of the seabed.
Mainstream scientists believe the strange object is a natural geological formation. But what if they're wrong? Could the sonar image actually be evidence of an underwater spacecraft of extraterrestrial origin?
There are rumors that there have been samples taken and a layered metallic structure, which would have to be manufactured. So the Baltic Sea anomaly is not explainable today. It's not being researched in public that we know of, but it does have a lot of characteristics that indicate it might be something from another world.
What we're looking at is probably an ancient crash site. There's definitely a skid mark you can see from it skipping or hitting the bottom of it. So it was definitely moving when it crashed there.
If this strange object really is an alien vehicle, why does it appear to be made of stone?
We all know what a petrified tree is. It was once alive and it became stone over time. So if this thing is petrified UFO down there, maybe it was alive and wasn't metal at all. Maybe it was some kind of living biological machine. I think what they've found is probably some kind of ancient fossilized UFO. Every now and again in human history, we seem to get lucky and find a real piece of evidence that seems to lean toward extraterrestrial presence here on Earth for a long, long time.
This isn't something that is natural and that was formed over time. There are very deliberate patterns on this object. So could it be that this is a crashed UFO? We have reports of these objects crashing on land. So why wouldn't we have something that would crash underwater? Whatever this object is, it is clear that it's out of place.
Now, I realize that nature does create some remarkable rock formations. We've seen them just in this valley. But if you were to argue that this discovery was nothing more than a unique rock formation, I'm sure that Hans Solo would have a bone to pick with you. Now, the U.S. Senate Intelligence Authorization Act, fiscal year 2023, this was a report that was presented to Congress a couple of months ago. We all remember the letdown when the U.S. Intelligence Committee released its long-awaited UFO report that was, 6 or 7 pages. It was basically just designed to say, nothing to see here, just move along. But this report is quite interesting. The last paragraph on page 12 has this heading: Modification of requirement for office to address unidentified aerospace undersea phenomena. Then the paragraph starts with this: at a time when cross-domain transmedium threats to the United States national security are expanding exponentially. Now, the term transmedium objects or devices means objects or devices that are observed to transition between space and the atmosphere, or between the atmosphere and bodies of water that are not immediately identifiable. Do you think the U.S. Intelligence Committee knows a lot more than they are telling us? Now see, I showed you several videos of the craft at the bottom of the sea and the 1942 attack and the 1997 strange UAP for 2 hours over Phoenix. People can try, and people do, to dismiss those things, but this cannot be dismissed because it's coming from our government quietly saying, yeah guys, we've got a problem, we've got these craft that are coming and going, transmedium, we don't know what they are, and they are probably a threat. So it's pretty evident to me that the government knows so much more than they're willing to share. We know the government isn't telling us everything. And it's frustrating because I think about those among us, the average person who has had an encounter, and they either cannot explain it or are afraid to tell anyone. How many of those people are out there suffering, feeling alone, isolated, and confused? Even though more and more people are beginning to believe that extraterrestrials are and have been visiting our planet for decades and longer, it is still taboo for people to share their own encounters. Unfortunately, you and I, the average person, aren't always considered credible when we decide to share a UFO experience. And I'm sure that's why most people who have those experiences don't share. And that's unfortunate because most people who do have some type of alien encounter are just average people like you and me. They're not scientists, cosmologists, or researchers. But I want to tell you about a man with great credibility. I was so impressed with one of the panels this afternoon where we had 2 university professors who are willing to stick their necks on the line and discuss and research the taboo topic of paranormal. This gentleman's name was John D. Krumboltz. He was a professor of education and psychology at Stanford University. I was fortunate to meet Professor Krumboltz years before he died in 2019 at the age of 90. He was a well-respected educator, researcher, author, and therapist whose work was known worldwide. Dr. Krumboltz went to Stanford in 1961 and revolutionized the fields of behavioral and career counseling by applying social theories of learning to the making of life decisions. In his 6 decades as one of America's most influential psychologists, he was co-director of the Stanford Graduate School of Education's Program in Counseling Psychology and the widely read author of many scholarly and popular books. I would think anyone who just heard this short bio would recognize this man was not a kook. A few years ago, 2 professors, after interviewing many master therapists around the world, authored a book titled Their Finest Hour. The purpose of the book was to find out what these renowned master therapists considered the finest moment in their careers. Dr. Krumboltz was featured in chapter 19, titled Treating the Trauma of Alien Abduction. Woo! After nearly 50 years in psychology, this highly respected researcher, educator, and lecturer considered his finest hour the day he met a middle-aged man he referred to as Phill, who had been hiding a lifetime of alien abduction. Dr. Krumboltz, using regression therapy, helped this man remember and deal with some of the most traumatic alien encounters. Now, I want to read just a short excerpt of this book. So, as these professors are interviewing Dr. Krumboltz for his finest hour moment, and he's telling them it had to do with alien abduction, here's what happened. They said, "We interrupted the narrative at this point to ask John to what extent he believed what he had told Phill. It seemed to us that some alternative hypothesis might be more viable. For instance, that Phill had been sexually abused as a child and had created this fantasy as a way to live with the experience. We were also concerned that John Krumboltz, one of the living legends of our field, might be seen as a little strange for confessing that he believes in alien abduction." Here's what Dr. Krumboltz said. "I suppose you guys are entitled to think I'm cuckoo for believing my client. But I have to tell you, I've been studying this phenomenon for many years. You may think this sounds crazy, and I used to be rather skeptical as well. But I had some experiences when I was in the Air Force that convinced me otherwise. A few times I actually sighted some UFOs that were confirmed by a witness. Now, I am not sure what to make of these things, but it did teach me to be open to what people report, whether it happened the way they said it did or not." It's people like Dr. Krumboltz that give me the courage to be here today to talk about these things.
Hey.
If credible professors from some of America's greatest universities like Stanford are willing to profess their belief in the UFO paranormal publicly, it makes it so much easier for the rest of us to speak up as well. I am here because I believe we are not alone in the universe. That belief, as I mentioned earlier, is based on numerous accounts I have read over the years of UFO sightings and alien encounters and abduction, my Christian religious beliefs, and even personal experiences. And today I'm going to share one of those with you. In 1974, I lived in Duluth, Georgia with my parents and 3 brothers. On Tuesday nights, I went to Boy Scouts at our church in Sandy Springs. There was also a ladies group that met on Tuesday nights, usually to quilt or sew or do other domestic stuff, and my mother was part of the group. Sometime around 9 p.m., All but two of us 13-year-old scouts were still left at the church, me and my friend Terry. There were still about a dozen women wrapping up their activities, and Terry and I sat on the front steps of the church, looking up at the dark, black, moonless sky. Suddenly, I pointed to a strange object about the size of a quarter, far off in the sky in the distance, that seemed to be moving toward us. It caught my attention because it was saucer-shaped and had colorful lights circling around its outer edge. It made no noise and glided through the air effortlessly. A moment later, we found ourselves staring at a massive alien ship, probably the size of a football field, only a few hundred feet directly above us. I remember Terry screaming and falling over. He kept yelling, "What is it? What is it?" For some reason, I wasn't afraid. In fact, I felt strangely calm. Unlike Terry, who nearly peed his pants, I stood looking up at the underbelly of this massive craft, admiring the metallic workmanship of crisscrossing membranes and the speeding multicolored lights that raced around the edge of the ship like a carnival attraction. Moments later, the ship lifted up, became really small, and disappeared. And Terry and I immediately ran into the church. Now, this is typical. Someone sees a UFO. They don't immediately go tell people because they're amazed at what they're witnessing. They usually don't say anything until after the event because they don't want to miss anything. So it's gone. We're blown away. We're excited. We run into the church screaming down the hallway. We just saw a UFO. We just saw a UFO. We get to the room where the ladies were, and they laughed and said, "Leave us alone, boys. Stop being silly." So we were feeling very dejected. So we went out the back door of the building and sat on the back steps in the parking lot, talking to each other about what we had just seen, frustrated that the women not only didn't believe us, but had no interest in even considering what we had seen. A couple moments later, my father and older brother showed up in the car to pick us all up and take us home. As soon as they pulled into the parking lot, Terry and I jumped up and ran towards them. My brother and father quickly opened the doors. As my brother ran towards us, he said, "You won't believe what we just saw." And I said, "You won't believe what we just saw." And then my dad, who never believed in anything like it, was standing almost in shock. And he said, "It was like a sideways Ferris wheel. I've never seen anything." That's all he could keep saying. "I've never seen anything like it." But my brother, 14-year-old brother, started describing the exact same ship that we had seen. But they were about 20 miles out, kind of in the middle of nowhere, no other traffic, and they looked up and they saw this thing coming towards them, and then it hovered right above them, and my dad slowed down and it slowed down. He stepped on the gas and it kept up with them, whether he was going fast or slow. This is when my dad got really scared and stepped on the gas, and a few minutes later it disappeared. So they're sharing that story with us. We're sharing our story with them. No more than 5 minutes later, it came back. Woo! This time, it came back and hovered over the church. And it was so low that we could see the individual lights that were streaming this direction and another that direction. And I ran in, because I'd seen it now already. I ran in and started screaming for my mother and those women. I demanded that they come out and see this. Finally, we got them to come out. I don't remember if it was 8 or 12 women. It doesn't matter. It was a lot. They came out onto the grass, and the rest of us are just standing there like a bunch of monkeys looking up at this thing. One of the ladies, 2 of them screamed, one of them passed out on the grass. And then as we're in this little group looking up at this white light grew in the center of it, and the light slowly came down. Now when you think of turning on a light, the light is on everywhere. It didn't do that. The light slowly came down until it hit the ground. It was around all of us as we're standing there looking up at this thing. And this lasted for several minutes. Then the light went back up, and the ship started rising, and it went really fast, and disappeared. Everybody, of course, was in shock. Most of the women wouldn't even talk. They were so terrified of what they experienced. The following Sunday, I was so excited to tell everybody about what we'd seen, tell everybody at church. Not one of those women said a word to anybody. Not one. I was so mad, and I said to my mom, why aren't you guys telling the other women in the church? Why aren't you telling everybody? And she said, shh, we don't talk about those things. This event happened in 1974. You can probably go look it up and find something online. Many, many people saw this. But not one adult was willing to talk about it. That's the sad part about these types of experiences. People are still afraid to this day, this many years later, to talk about it. I have believed since I was a small boy, and frankly, I can't remember a time in my life when I did not believe that the earth was being visited by aliens from other worlds. I was talking to someone at our booth earlier today, and I said, think about this. Most of the time when people think of aliens from other worlds, they think of these strange-looking creatures. You know, I showed you the video about the ones under the earth that are working with the Illuminati. People think that's what they all look like. I don't believe they all look that way. But here's what I said to this lady. I said, think about all of the races on our planet. Look at the difference between an Aborigine and a 6'2" Caucasian. Look at how different I look from that person. Look at the Chinese. Look at the Japanese. Look at all of the different races right here on this planet. So I don't have a problem that people could look a little different from another planet. I'm not sure they have weird intent or messy, you know, I'm not sure about all that. But I don't have a problem with the idea that God, when he says he created his children in his own image, I'm in the same image of God as that Aborigine is, because God created him too, even though we look very, very different. So I don't have a problem that there could be beings on other planets that were also created by the same God, who may look very different than me. So after reading Dr. Krumbolz's account of alien abduction and learning about so many others for so many years, I decided to write a book to help explain what I've learned are some of these off-world visitors, their purpose, their plans, including eyewitness accounts from several abductees. I invited my good friend Richard Nelson, who is sitting on the edge, to be my co-author. I need to give Richard Nelson a hand. Our goal was simple. We wanted to bridge the Christian community and the alien community together. Simple, huh? I know it was a big goal, but here's the premise. If there's one supreme creator, the video I showed you at the beginning, almost every single civilization, I don't care what their religious background is, believe in a supreme creator. If there is one supreme creator, let's recognize Christians over here and the alien believers that we were all created by the same God. Bring us together. That's the purpose of Return from Rysa. We wanted to explain how they were both right, without being preachy or overly religious. Instead, with the help, we didn't want to write the typical textbook. I'm not going to disparage other books on aliens, because I'm sure there's some wonderful books. But my frustration is someone will write a book about seeing a ship, and that's their entire 400-page book, that they saw something. Or one event is an entire 400-page book. I didn't want to write another textbook like that. I wanted to be able to share things that Richard and I and my wife and others have learned through personal experience and also through the experiences of others. So instead, we were able to receive the help of an internationally known New York Times best-selling author of fantasy fiction. Oh my gosh, it just walked in Brandon Mull of the Fablehaven series, among many others. And then we were incredibly blessed to have his editor, Berlin, be the editor of our book. And it was because of these two that we turned a story into an incredible epic. Now, I know some in the audience have read the book. I know Wayne said that he read the book. It's been exciting for us to see the reaction we're getting. We're hearing from people around the country. I heard from a lady from Australia who read this book. You know, you look at that and you think aliens, and she said, it strengthened my belief in God. Yes, that's what I wanted. That's my goal. So I want to talk a little bit about the book. But I'm going to start with an 8-minute promo video. It's an audio version of the first scene in chapter 1. Now, I have to preface this. Brandon Mull wrote the back cover of the book, and the last thing he said on the back is, it's too intense for children. And he's right. It is too intense for children. I'm not saying children can't read it. We had our book launch last March, and I had a 9-year-old girl come to me. She had drawn a picture of the front cover and told me it was her favorite book. I thought, oh my gosh, you're 9 years old. But you'll see what I mean when you listen to this 8-minute video. It wasn't created to scare people, but this is how the book starts to help people understand what they're getting into.
Return from Rysa. Chapter 1, Aliens and Angels.
Candidate found, possible likely study. Authorized test and tag have I. Ship crew 5, waiting of darkness assessment make.
Anisian message intercepted by Rysa listening post. Davinia, 16 January, 1965. The loud whisper echoed in his head. He opened his eyes and tried to see where it was coming from, but the room was too dark. He pushed his head deeper into his pillow and tucked the covers up just beneath his eyes. He heard it again. He squinted until his eyes were nearly shut and tried to see if someone was there. He wanted to wake his older brother Christopher in the bunk above him, but that would mean he would have to pull the covers down and reveal his hiding place to the high-pitched and odd-sounding voice that kept calling his name. He felt his chest tighten and the muscles of his upper body contract, seeing only darkness and hearing nothing but the beat of his heart. "If I just be still, it won't find me," he whispered. He heard his breathing, fearful that it would reveal his location. He slowly filled his lungs and held his breath, hoping the person behind the voice would go away. Moments later, the air burst from his lungs and he inhaled deeply. Terrified that he had been discovered, he lifted the covers over his head and his breathing became quick and rapid. A few moments passed and he began to slow his breathing. Still with the covers over his head, he listened, but heard nothing. He hoped it was gone. He wanted to yell for his mother, but was afraid the monster would come back. The heat and humidity from his breathing caused his tented hiding place to become too hot. He slowly lowered the covers just enough to allow his eyes to peer through. But it was still too dark to see. "Maybe it is gone," he said as his eyes began to close. A thought entered his mind, a memory of a few days earlier, when the dark ghost appeared one day in his room. It was standing a few inches above the floor, tucked into the corner when Connor first noticed it. The ghost was tall and slender with dark black shoulder-length hair. Its face handsome yet grimacing. Its eyes were dark and deep-set, staring intently into the room. When Connor noticed the being, his immediate reaction was to wave hello. It looked odd for an evil spirit to be startled, especially by a small boy. The dark spirit wrenched its head, jerking its face toward Connor. With its eyes wide, it looked at him and demanded, "Can you see me?" "I can see you. Can you see me?" asked a friendly Connor. The being moved awkwardly closer to Connor, moving its legs, mimicking a walking motion, yet never touching the floor, instead gliding and dragging like a wounded animal. It shoved its dark and smoky face inches from Connor's. "I know who you are, little boy," it said in a scowling voice. "I've known you from the beginning." The dark spirit lifted its right hand, stretching its dim and twisted fingers toward Connor's face. Suddenly, Connor's mother walked into the room, and the spirit winced, shielding its face from her with its transparent arm as if her very presence was repelling. It turned and fled through the outside wall. And now, Connor wondered if it was back. He tried to keep his eyes open, but the lids began to shut. Each time they covered his eyes, they bounced back up, until finally the weight of each eyelid was too much to hold up. The last thing he heard as he felt himself drifting off to sleep was the echoing whisper, "Connor, Connor, 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 Connor." He opened his eyes, wide and awake. He sat up in his bed. He slid his legs off the bed and stood in the darkness without bending over to make sure there was not a monster under the bed, something he always did. Instead, he began to walk in the darkness, and the darkness did not seem to affect his typical anxiousness or ability to move. He was now listening to the voice in his head.
Come with me, little boy. Let us play,"
the voice said. Connor left the bedroom and began walking down the long, narrow hallway, passing his baby sister's room and then his parents'.
"Yes, listen my voice. It bring you to me. We will play,"
it whispered in his mind. The kitchen floor was cold on his bare feet, but he kept walking, listening to the voice. The back door was ajar, just enough for the crisp breeze to cause him to shiver, but just for a moment. He opened the door and looked across the walkway and saw the side door into the garage. It was open.
"Yes, yes. You almost here, friend. Go in garage. We wait for you. We play with you,"
said the enticing and luring voice. As he stepped onto the cold, hard concrete, another voice began to speak to him. "Connor, you are a big boy. Do not listen to their voices. They are not friends. Listen to me, and I will tell you what to do," said the familiar, soft, and comforting voice. The first voice seemed to push the other aside as it spoke with a more harsh and commanding tone.
"Come in garage now. Listen me. We must play."
As Connor entered the garage, he suddenly recognized where he was, and it was dark, dusty, and terrifying. He knew there would be bugs and spiders in there, creatures he always avoided. The door slammed loudly behind him without shutting completely. He was now awake. Run up the stairway and hide in the back. You will be safe there," the second voice yelled in his mind. Connor forced the first voice out of his head and quickly ran up the short stairway to the loft in the back of the garage.
was dark and difficult to see, but he ran to the back and climbed up and sat on the highest things he could find. The voice returned,
Come down, let us play. We have fun. Let us play.
It demanded. Connor placed his hands over his ears and, shaking his head, began to cry. Mommy, I need you. Mommy.
But this is how the story starts. And the reason we started it this way is because we introduced aliens, evil spirits, and angels. As Connor progresses through his life, God sends him angels, 3 little angels that stay with him as he's having, before and after he has these terrifying experiences, to show that he is loved. This is life experience, but you're going to be okay. So I want to talk briefly about some of these beings that we have discovered. The Greys. Through our research, we've learned that the Greys are humanoid beings from the planet Onision. We refer to them as Onisians. Although there are other aliens who look similar, the Onision are probably the most common aliens who abduct people for genetic experimentation. Now, the book explains how they've entered into an agreement with major world governments, I'm sure you've never heard that before, to exchange their technology for human DNA. Part of that agreement is that they cannot maim or kill their abductees, something that the Grey would never intentionally do anyway, and they must return them to the same place from which they found them. Now, the Onisians and some others refer to this planet, Earth, as Divinia. So in the book, we refer to Earth as Divinia. The Onisian come from within the Pleiades system. Their planet is located approximately 442 light years from Earth, and it orbits a yellow star similar to our sun. We also learned how a segment of these aliens became rogue, and they joined with another alien group on Earth and began violating that government agreement. Through our research, the rogue Onisian broke away from their race and entered an alliance with a group known as the Ball. And Wayne, I'm going to ask you really quick. I just talked to Wayne Smith yesterday, and he talked about how he saw an episode from Linda Howell. Wayne, are you still here?
Yeah.
Can you briefly mention what that was? Because it kind of blew me away as I think about the book we've written and what you told me in this episode.
So the VOL, it's an acronym for
Vondekai, it means void of light.
Void of light. And the way that they appear is very similar to the way some of the Sasquatch are described. So I was telling him that I remember seeing a Linda Moulton Howe news piece. She was saying that she had enough individual reports from eyewitnesses who had seen Greys interacting with Sasquatch, and the Sasquatch were in the, I guess, attitude of doing the bidding of the Greys. And so the Greys would be standing there, the Sasquatch would be doing the thing, and she did this. She used to be a big-time reporter, and she ended up moving on to like cattle mutilations and other things, and then she just devoted herself to the UFO paranormal stuff. But so when she does something, it's always backed up the best you could hope for. So
thank you. I just was kind of blown away when you told me that, because we talk about a part of the Onisians break away. We refer to them as the rogue Onisian, and they join an alliance with these Ball, the Vondekai, who were very evil. They're about 8 feet tall. They have very dark skin. I'm not going to say that they look like dark-skinned Caucasian people with very thick black hair and lots of fine black hair on their face and their whole bodies. So at a distance, and their eyes glow red. At a distance, somebody may confuse a Vol for Sasquatch. Another unique thing about the Vol is they have the ability through technology to come and go instantly. They have a device we refer to as a personal black hole that actually opens up and they step into it and then it closes. So again, I'm not here to talk about Bigfoot, but as I've heard things about Bigfoot in this conference and how elusive Bigfoot is, I'm thinking, I wonder if they're tracking the wrong creature and don't realize it. The Vol are a very malevolent humanoid race, and they're from the planet Asaria. Now, Connor discovers evil entities from other dimensions. We talk about how Divinia is plagued by an evil spirit known as Zatar, who commands a large host of dark spirits condemned with Zatar to Divinia by the Creator. Zatar persuades the Vol to enter an alliance with him. Now, I don't want to end on a dark note, so let me tell you about another amazing race. From Rysa describes a race of benevolent beings that some mistake for the Nordics. They are actually known as the Rysa. They are a group of beings from a terrestrial world named Rysa. They have been assigned by Mandakai, the first of light, to protect Divinia and certain of its people from the followers of Zatar. The Rysan are very tall. They're between 7 and 8 feet tall. They have very broad shoulders, thick white hair, and very bright blue eyes. The Sword of Light is the most powerful weapon in the universe, the most powerful personal weapon in the universe. The Rysan are not aggressive, but have an amazing ability to defend themselves and others using this powerful weapon. So, the last thing I want to talk about is, what does an alien space station look like? This is what we normally see on television shows, or this is what an alien space station looks like. Rysa, because it's a terrestrialized planet, is encompassed by a very hot sun-like ring that actually hides the planet. It makes it appear like it's a glowing star. So the only beings that can penetrate that being are terrestrial beings, and I'm talking about beings that are a higher level than we are. Consider us celestial beings. So if the Rysan want to communicate with other races that are not terrestrialized, they have created this type of space station. It looks like a big piece of land. It has a lake, it has rivers, it has mountains, it has buildings, and it has places for other beings to dock their ships. It also has its own atmosphere, and as you can see in this picture, it even has a type of sun that rotates it to give them typical days. So, as we have written this book, it has just been such an amazing experience to talk to people and learn about things that, for me, and I know for Rick, have filled in so many gaps and answered so many questions, confirming, number one, we are not alone in the universe. Neither should we be terrified that those who visit us are working with our Illuminati overlords to find a way to destroy us. I personally believe that we have beings from many, many worlds that have been and continue visiting us. And the main reason I believe that, and I'm going to throw a little bit of religion in at the very end, is because I believe that God, the Supreme Creator, created a plan where He gave all of His creations agency. And part of that plan, He also gave them a way to become clean from the mistakes and the sins they made. And He did that by sending His Son to be the Savior of the universe. So because I believe that, it's easy for me to understand why so many beings would come to this little blue marble. We don't have technology to go to all of their places. Anyway, we don't have that. Why are they coming here? What's their motivation? I believe that's the motivation. If I lived on another planet and I knew about this planet and I believed in God and I believed that God came to this planet, I would want to go visit that planet if I had the technology and the ability to do so. That's my personal belief. And that makes me feel so much better about why so many strange beings from other worlds may come. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.